Hi everyone, this is Kiko and Tamara. Thanks for tuning in to our presentation on Denmark. We now ask you to consider the following question. What do the Danish opt-outs mean for Denmark's place in the EU, and what are the possible ramifications of these? Before anything else, let's begin with a brief history of Denmark. Denmark all began with the uniting of Norway, Sweden, and Finland to create the Kalmar Union, had its first liberal constitution published in 1814, and from there became a member of NATO, the EEC, and the EU. Although there is a general law in place for all 28 countries that compose the EU, there are occasionally situations in which member states may decide to withdraw membership from certain policy areas or all policy areas. This is an opt-out. These opt-outs are decided through referendums or votes by the population of member states and are implemented by the EU, thus having a cause and effect relationship between the individual and the whole. There are 4 areas in which Denmark has been granted the opportunity to opt out. These include security and defense, citizenship, police and justice, and the adoption of the euro. This all began in 1992 with the Maastricht Treaty, which had voiced a no from the Danish population and halted the ratification process of the entirety of the European Union until the proposal was modified to yield a yes response. This led to the re-acceleration of the ratification of the EU. Following this referendum was another in the year 2000, which was centralized around the adoption or rejection of the euro. After a final majority favoring the rejection of the euro, Denmark became one of a handful of countries who decided to stay closely engaged with the EU even without the centralized currency system, proving an effort to move away from holding an image of skepticism. Finally, in 2015, Denmark faced the decision of whether they would accept a case-by-case basis membership with the EU, which they ultimately declined. Many became concerned that Denmark would become the next black sheep in the future following the UK once it voted out on this exact issue. So what are the possible ramifications if Denmark were to opt out? A main concern held by the EU in a negative response of Denmark's membership in the justice and home affairs policies ultimately snowballs into the issues surrounding whether other skeptics will arise. Since Denmark is allowed to pick and choose the various parts of the policies that it wishes to take part in and those it wishes to opt out, why shouldn't other countries be allowed to make these choices too? Without the equality between countries' opt-out options, this could ultimately lead to the implosion of the EU. Although the Prime Minister has vocalized numerous times that it will not be following in the footsteps of the UK in opt-outs from the EU, many people fear Denmark and its skeptic view towards membership will make it join the other non-believers in abandonment of the EU membership harmony. Since the Danish vote of no toward involvement with the JHA, Denmark now sees barriers towards maintaining access to Europol. This ultimately could result in the decomposition of the national security within the country. Thus, the country should focus on a better compromise within the EU. All in all, although there are many perspectives on whether Denmark should use its opt-outs, we believe that the majority of the outcomes that could occur through the abandonment of Denmark towards the EU would most likely only cause great issues of security. Denmark should instead focus its energy on socialism and work together with the EU. Thanks for watching.
Created using Powtoon.